"Guys who look like that," Officer Dale Pruett muttered, already reaching for the light bar. "Don't drive cars like that. Not around here." Tommy Ortega looked at the dispatch screen. No call, no reported violation. He looked through the windshield at the midnight black Lamborghini moving through the intersection ahead of them, perfectly centered in its lane, turn signal on, decelerating smoothly for the upcoming stop sign. He said nothing. He had been riding with Pruett for 6 weeks, and he had learned, in those 6 weeks, that saying nothing was the wrong choice every time he made it, and that he kept making it anyway, and that the weight of this was beginning to accumulate in a way he could not ignore for much longer. Pruett hit the light bar, 2 streets away, in the opposite direction. The oak trees of Meridian Avenue were losing the last of the evening light. Dusk came fast in Oak Grove in October, the sky going violet at the edges, then bruised orange, then the particular blue-gray that preceded full dark. The street lamps on Meridian flickered on in sequence, each one casting a clean circle of light on the empty sidewalk below. It was a Friday evening in a wealthy suburb of a mid-sized Ohio city, and the only thing moving on the avenue was a midnight black sports car driven by a man who had, for the previous 40 minutes, been observing the neighborhood with the careful, unhurried attention of someone who needed to understand a place before he could be responsible for it. He had noted the billboard at the south end of the avenue at mile marker 3. He had noted the partial concealment it provided from the road. He had noted the cruiser parked behind it, lights off, engine running. He had noted the timestamp when the cruiser pulled out. 4 minutes. 6 weeks ago, driving these same streets in a rental car. It had taken 11 minutes. He was making progress. In the cruiser. Pruett accelerated onto Meridian with the specific urgency of a man who has already written the story of the stop and needs only to arrive at the location where it will take place. He did not look at the dispatch log again. He did not check whether the vehicle registration carried any flags. He did not consider, for even a fraction of a second, whether the man behind the wheel of that Lamborghini might have any reason that made complete sense to be exactly where he was. He had been making this kind of decision for 11 years on these streets. He had a rough number in his head of how many times his instincts had been right. He had never bothered to count the other times. There had always been someone to make the other times go away. Tommy reached into his left breast pocket. His personal phone. He opened the voice memo application. He looked at the screen for 3 seconds. Then he pressed record and put the phone back in his pocket. He did not know, in that moment, whether this was brave or foolish or both. He only knew that what was about to happen on Meridian Avenue should not happen without a record, and that he was the only person in a position to make one. Dale Pruett had pulled people over on these streets for 11 years. He had a number in his head, a rough count of how many times his instincts had been right. He had never bothered to count the other times. Tonight, for the first time in 11 years, the other times were going to count for him. Oak Grove was the kind of Ohio city that looked, from the right angle, like the fulfillment of a specific American promise, the one about hard work and quiet streets and a place to park a car in a driveway you owned. Meridian Avenue was its most visible expression of that promise. Wide lanes, mature oak trees planted at regular intervals, houses set back from the road behind careful landscaping, the occasional luxury vehicle in a driveway that nobody remarked on because nobody needed to remark on anything in a neighborhood where everything was already understood. It was also, according to a Department of Justice report filed 14 months ago, one of the most statistically anomalous traffic stop corridors in the state of Ohio. The report used language that was careful and bureaucratic, and that described, in its tables and footnotes and appendices, something that was not careful at all. Traffic stop rates for minority drivers on Meridian Avenue and its surrounding corridors were 340% above the department average. Search rates following those stops ran at 89%. The discovery rate, the percentage of searches that found anything, was under 3%. The footnotes contained names, complainants, people who had filed formal reports with the department about stops that had felt wrong. 41 names in 4 years, each one followed by a case number and a disposition, reviewed and closed. Calvin Reeves had read the report 3 times. He had the key tables memorized. He had driven these streets 6 weeks ago in a rental car, a nondescript gray sedan. Nothing remarkable, just to feel the gap between the data and the physical reality of the place. 11 minutes after entering the Meridian corridor, a cruiser had found him. Tonight, in the Lamborghini, it had taken 4. Calvin Reeves was 51 years old. The Lamborghini Huracan, midnight black. Meticulous, the only luxury he had allowed himself in a career defined by the systematic deferral of personal indulgence, had been purchased 14 months ago as a retirement gift, bought the week after he submitted his papers at the Cleveland Metropolitan Police Department after 26 years. The last 8 of those years had been spent leading the department's Internal Affairs Division. He had reviewed 41 illegal search cases in that time. He knew what they looked like from every angle. He was dressed for a Friday evening, a gray college hoodie, worn soft from years of washing, dark jeans, clean white sneakers. He looked like nobody in particular. He drove with the deliberateness of a man who understood that in this neighborhood, at this hour, in this car, every movement was being observed and evaluated. Cruise control at exactly 35 miles per hour, the posted limit, not 1 mile over, both hands at 10 and 2. Turn signals used a full 100 feet before every turn. At stop signs, he counted 3 full seconds before releasing the brake. He had been doing this for 40 minutes, driving the corridors the DOJ report described, watching the street lamps and the quiet houses and the billboard positions and the places where a cruiser could sit with its lights off and its engine running. He was doing the preparation he always did before a significant assignment, not from behind a desk, not from a report, but from inside the thing itself. In the back seat was a metallic briefcase. It was closed and locked. Calvin had checked the combination twice before leaving the hotel. Left lock, 1887. Right lock, 1887. The year Oak Grove was incorporated, a piece of trivia that he had encountered in the city's founding documents, which he had read in the second week of his 6-week preparation. In the same reading session where he had encountered the names of the 9 individuals credited as the department's founding officers. He had set the combination that day because he wanted something only the chief of this department would know, and because he was, as of noon today, the chief of this department. He did not tell anyone the combination. He did not expect anyone to ask. On the passenger seat, in a worn leather folio that had accompanied him through 26 years and 3 cities, was a letter. He had been drafting it for 3 weeks. It was addressed to the family of Detective James Whitfield, his partner for 9 years in Cleveland narcotics, the man who had known without being told when Calvin needed cover and when he needed space, the man who had sat across from him in a precinct break room at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in November in the middle of their 7th year together and said something that Calvin had been carrying ever since. James had died of a heart attack 18 months ago at 53. He never made it to retirement. He had been 3 years out when his heart gave out on a Sunday morning in his kitchen, and Calvin had driven to the hospital and sat in a plastic chair in a hallway for 4 hours and thought, among many other things, about the conversation in the break room. It had been an ordinary conversation, the way the most important conversations often are. They were talking about a case, a complaint filed by a young man whose car had been searched illegally 3 times in 8 months by the same officer. The complaint had been reviewed and dismissed each time. The young man had eventually sold his car because In his own words from the complaint file, it was too nice to drive around here without getting stopped. James had read this and set the file down and said, "When we get to run things the right way, make sure the people who need protecting actually get protected," he had said when, not if, that had been intentional. When Mayor Frank Briggs called 8 weeks ago and asked Calvin to take over the Oak Grove PD, hemorrhaging civil rights lawsuits, losing public trust by the quarter, staring down a federal consent decree, Calvin had thought about James before he thought about anything else. He had said was the same day. He had been trying to finish the letter for 3 weeks. He had not been able to find the right ending because he had not yet done what he came here to do. He needed to do it first. The briefcase on the back seat was impeccably organized. Calvin had packed it himself on Wednesday evening in his hotel room, working from a checklist he had maintained since the appointment was confirmed. Left side, the formal appointment documents bearing the City of Oak Grove's seal. The municipal charter provisions confirming his administrative authority, effective upon the mayor's signature at noon today. His own annotated copy of the DOJ report with the 41 complainants' names underlined in blue ink. Right side, carefully folded, a dark blue police uniform shirt, 4 gold stars on each collar, catching the overhead light of the hotel room in a way that had made him stop and look at them for longer than he expected. In the center, in a custom velvet inset, a gold badge, Chief of Police, Oak Grove, his name on the reverse side in precise engraved lettering. He had held it for a long time when the department liaison delivered it to his room on Wednesday. He had thought about James. He had thought about the 41 names. He had thought about the young man who sold his car because it was too nice to drive without being stopped. Then, he had placed the badge in its inset, closed the briefcase, and set the combination. 1887, both locks. A piece of trivia only a departmental historian, a city official, or someone who had spent the previous 6 weeks reading everything there was to read about this city and its police department would know. He drove north on Meridian. The street lamps made their circles of light on the empty sidewalk. The oak trees held their last October leaves against the darkening sky. The Lamborghini moved at exactly 35 miles per hour, unhurried and precise. Through the neighborhood it had just become his responsibility to protect. Then the lights came on in his rearview mirror. Dale Pruett did not think of himself as a racist. He thought of himself as a realist. He had been on these streets for 11 years, and 11 years of patrol had taught him, or so he believed, to read situations with a speed and accuracy that no academy training could produce. He had a word for the feeling that drove his stops: displacement. A private word, not one he used with other officers or wrote in any report. Just the specific interior language he had developed to describe a thing he understood as professional instinct rather than what it actually was. Certain people in certain places represented an error that needed to be addressed. He was the person authorized to address it. This was, in his private accounting, simply the job. He had grown up 3 miles from Meridian Avenue, in a neighborhood that had changed during his adolescence in ways he experienced not as demographic change, but as personal loss. The construction management work he had done through his 20s had paid adequately and given him nothing else. The badge, when he finally got it at 33, gave him something no employer had ever provided: the authority to enforce his sense of what was right. He had recognized this authority immediately and had been using it with increasing confidence ever since. He had 17 use-of-force complaints on record. Every one had been reviewed and dismissed by Captain Roy Haller within an average of 9 days. Pruett had long since stopped thinking about the complaints. They had never mattered. He had no reason to believe they ever would. Captain Roy Haller had run the Oak Grove PD's patrol division for 19 years on a single operating principle. Officers who produced numbers and understood that internal loyalty superseded external accountability received protection. The protection was never explicit. It was demonstrated through outcomes over time. A complaint would arrive. It would go to Haller. It would go away. An officer learned what this meant. Pruett had learned faster than most. On Thursday, a memo had arrived from the mayor's office. Subject: Incoming Administrative Leadership, Department Transition Protocol. It announced a new chief of police, effective Monday, and outlined a comprehensive review of departmental practices and immediate implementation of enhanced accountability measures. Pruett had read it at his desk Thursday afternoon. He had walked the copy to Haller's office and placed it on the captain's desk without speaking. Haller had read it once, set it down, and said nothing. His expression had not changed. But Pruett had seen something in the set of his jaw, the specific compression of a man who has received information he already expected and is processing its implications rather than the information itself. That evening, Pruett had texted 3 other officers a single line: "Enjoy the weekend." It was not a casual message. All 3 understood what it meant. Friday evening, Pruett requested the Meridian Avenue corridor for his shift, a sector outside his usual assignment, which he had requested 3 of the previous 4 Fridays. He had not explained these requests. No one had asked him to. He had also, at the start of his shift, not activated his body camera. This was a direct violation of Oak Grove PD Policy 41-A, which required continuous camera operation from the beginning of each shift. Pruett had violated 41A on 47 documented occasions in the past 2 years, according to the camera system's own logs, which nobody had reviewed because the review mechanism ran through Haller's office. None of the 47 violations had produced a consequence. He parked behind the billboard at mile marker 3 on Meridian, a position he knew from experience provided concealment from both directions while maintaining a clear sight line to the northbound lane. He cut his lights. He sat with the engine running and the dispatch screen dark, watching the sparse Friday evening traffic. He was not looking for violations. He was looking for the specific category of thing that his private vocabulary called displacement, and he was looking for it in the specific location, Meridian Avenue, a wealthy corridor where finding it produced the particular satisfaction that had become, over 11 years, the primary reward of his work. The Lamborghini crested the hill at 7:43 p.m. Tommy Ortega saw it before Pruett spoke. He had been watching the road with the specific, exhausted vigilance of someone who had spent 6 weeks waiting for a stop that was worse than the ones before it. He looked at the dispatch screen. No call, no flag, no reported incident. He looked at the Lamborghini, centered in its lane, appropriate speed, turn signal already on for the upcoming intersection. He looked at Pruett's face. The shift in Pruett's expression when he saw the driver, the quick intake, the jaw tightening, the hand moving toward the light bar before his body had fully registered the decision, was something Tommy had seen before, in variations, 11 times in 6 weeks. Each time, he had done nothing except stand near the rear of whatever vehicle was being searched and watch and add the stop to his mental list and go home afterward, feeling like a person who had failed some test he had not been given the chance to study for. He had been raised by a woman who had spent 22 years as a school administrator and who had, on the last evening before he left for the academy, said something that he had been carrying like a stone in his chest ever since. When you know something is wrong and you say nothing, you become the wrong thing. He had been becoming the wrong thing for 6 weeks. When Pruett reached for the light bar, Tommy reached into his breast pocket, his personal phone. He opened the voice memo application and looked at the screen for 3 seconds, long enough to make a decision he could not unmake, and pressed record. Then he reached with his other hand to the clip on his uniform's chest strap and confirmed that his own body camera was active and recording. He verified the timestamp, He put his hands in his lap. He did not know what he would do with the recording. He only knew that what was about to happen on Meridian Avenue, what had been about to happen on Meridian Avenue for 11 years, should not happen in a world where there was no record of it, and that he was the only person in the cruiser who understood this, and that understanding it and doing nothing about it was precisely the thing his mother had warned him against. Pruett hit the lights. The Lamborghini signaled and began to slow. "See how he's slowing down perfectly," Pruett said. "He knows we're here. He's nervous." "Or he's just a good driver," Tommy said. Pruett looked at him with the flat tolerance of a man who has already decided the conversation is beneath him. "You'll learn," he said, and pulled the cruiser up behind the Lamborghini as it came to a stop in the light of a street lamp. Calvin saw the lights come on and felt something he recognized as disappointment. Not surprise, not fear, but the specific, weighted disappointment of a man who has read a report and then driven these streets and is now watching the report prove itself in real time, in real light. On a Friday evening that was supposed to be about observation and is now about something else entirely. He had 43 seconds before the cruiser closed the distance. He used them. He checked the speedometer, 35 exactly. He checked his hands, 10 and 2. He checked the road ahead and identified the best available pullover position, a wide, well-lit section of Meridian 50 yards ahead, directly beneath a working street lamp. With a clean curb and adequate clearance, he adjusted his route by 30 feet to reach it. He wanted the stop to happen in the best possible light. Literally. He signaled. He decelerated over the length of a full block, not braking, decelerating, smooth and deliberate. He parked the Lamborghini in a position parallel to the curb, centered in the street lamp's cone of light, with 18 inches of clearance from the nearest parked vehicle. Then, he did the things he had trained officers to tell civilians to do, because he had always believed that the protocol existed for a reason, and that the reason was to remove variables from a situation that had too many of them. He turned off the engine. He rolled down both windows entirely, all the way. Nothing ambiguous about the glass. He turned on the interior cabin lights, overhead, footwells, the reading lights above both seats. He placed both hands flat on the top of the steering wheel, palms down, fingers visible. He waited. In the rearview mirror, he watched the cruiser. The driver's door opened. The passenger's door opened. 2 officers, the driver, Pruett. He had already read the name on the unit assignment through the back glass. Moved toward the car without pausing, his right hand already resting on his holster before he had cleared the cruiser's front bumper. The passenger, younger, Hispanic, his body language already signaling the particular discomfort of someone who did not want to be where he was, moved to the rear quarter panel and stopped. Calvin noted Pruett's camera light was not active. He looked at the passenger officer's camera. Active, green indicator light steady. He filed this. Pruett positioned himself just behind the driver's window, not at the window, behind it, so that Calvin had to turn his head at an uncomfortable angle to establish eye contact. A positioning tactic. Calvin recognized it. He had documented it in 7 of the 41 cases he had reviewed in internal affairs. The flashlight came on. Direct beam into Calvin's face, despite the fully illuminated interior. The beam was not a search. It was a statement. License, registration, proof of insurance. Now, no greeting, no reason, just the opening move of a man who had decided the terms before he left his vehicle. Calvin spoke first, before reaching for anything. "Good evening, officer. Could you please lower the light? The cabin is fully illuminated, and the beam is affecting my vision." "I didn't ask for your commentary. Papers." Calvin narrated every movement before making it. Wallet from the left jacket pocket, registration from the glove compartment, insurance card from behind the registration. He handled each item slowly, with the deliberate care of a man who understood that in this situation, every movement was being assessed and every unnecessary motion was a potential pretext. He handed the documents through the window. Pruett took them without looking at them. "What's the reason for the stop, officer?" Pruett looked at the driver's license. "Window tint. Both windows are fully lowered. The tint is factory standard and state compliant. The windows have been down since before you approached the vehicle." "I also observed swerving in the lane." "I did not swerve." Calvin's voice was level, not combative, just precise. "I have been on this road for 40 minutes driving at the posted limit with both hands on the wheel." Pruett slapped his open hand against the roof of the Lamborghini. The sound was sharp in the quiet evening. The impact left a faint print on the clear coat. Calvin's jaw set by a fraction. "Evidence," he noted. "Filed." "Step out of the vehicle," Pruett said. The request was legally permissible. Pennsylvania versus Mims, clearly established. Calvin knew the case. The initial stop was unconstitutional, which meant everything that followed was fruit of a poisonous tree. But a roadside debate with an armed and agitated officer was not a useful deployment of his energy. He had a different objective. He wanted to see exactly how far this would go. He wanted the record to be complete. "I am complying with your order to exit the vehicle," Calvin said, in a voice pitched to carry past Pruett to the rear of the car, where Tommy Ortega was standing with his hand pressed against his breast pocket. "I am unbuckling my seatbelt now. My hands are visible." He pushed the door open and stepped out. He was 6 feet tall and broad-shouldered, and stepping out of the low-slung car brought him to full height, 2 inches above Pruett, who registered this with a specific, visible tension in the neck and shoulders that Calvin recognized as the body language of a man converting perceived physical challenge into aggression. Pruett ordered him against the car, hands on the roof, legs apart. Calvin complied. The pat-down that followed was not a Terry frisk. It was an invasive. Full-body search conducted with unnecessary force, boot kicks to the inside of Calvin's ankles, hands pressing hard against his sides. Tommy, standing near the rear of the car, watched with the expression of someone who is cataloging violations in real time. "He's clean. Brad," Tommy said. His voice was tight. "There's nothing here. We should run his license and let him go." "I smell marijuana," Pruett said. The words fell into the quiet evening like something manufactured, which they were. Calvin straightened from the car. He turned to face Pruett. "You do not smell marijuana," he said. The conversational register of his voice had shifted, not louder, not angrier, but with a precision and a weight that had not been there before. The voice of a man who has been patient for a specific and limited amount of time and has reached the end of that time. "I do not smoke. No one has ever smoked in that vehicle. I am explicitly stating, for the record, that I do not consent to any search of my property. I don't need your consent." "Officer Ortega," Calvin addressed Tommy directly, over Pruett's shoulder, in the same tone he had used in 1,000 internal affairs interviews, direct, documented, intended for the record as much as for the recipient. "I want you to hear this clearly. I do not consent to any search of this vehicle. I am stating it now. I will state it again if asked, and I expect it to be reflected accurately in your documentation of this stop." Tommy said nothing, but his hand pressed against his breast pocket, and his eyes met Calvin's for a half-second with the specific quality of a man who has heard something he needed to hear, confirmed out loud. "Turn around," Pruett said. "Hands behind your back." "Am I being arrested?" "Not yet. Turn around." Calvin turned. He stood at the side of his own car, hands at his sides, while Pruett began moving toward the vehicle to begin the search. He looked at the street lamp above him, the clean circle of light it was casting over the entire scene, over the car and the officers and the briefcase in the back seat that had been sitting there since Wednesday, and that was about to become the most important piece of evidence in a federal civil rights case. He looked at the billboard at the south end of the avenue. He looked at the sky going fully dark above the oak trees. He began, methodically and in order, building the record in his head. Pruett started with the interior. He pulled down the sun visors, both of them, in sequence, with the quick certainty of someone who knows the motion but not the reason for it. He opened the center console and pushed aside its contents. A phone charging cable, a small package of tissues, a tin of mints, a folded receipt from a gas station in Cleveland dated 2 weeks prior. He picked up each item and set it aside with the specific carelessness of a man demonstrating authority through the displacement of another person's belongings. He pulled up the floor mats, custom fitted, deep pile, the kind of material that cost more than Pruett's entire utility belt, and threw them onto the passenger seat. He leaned across the driver's seat to reach the glove compartment, his heavy utility belt buckle dragging across the seat's leather bolster, leaving a faint scuff mark in the material that was approximately 2 inches long. Calvin stood beside the car and watched. He did not protest the small things. He was saving his attention for the documentation. Every item moved, every surface contacted, every mark left. He had conducted 41 reviews of illegal searches in his career. He had read the officers' reports, the complainants' accounts, the physical evidence logs. He knew what a thorough evidentiary record looked like, and he was building one now, in his own head. With the accuracy of a man who had spent 8 years developing exactly this capacity. He was also watching Tommy. Tommy was standing near the rear quarter panel, hands at his sides, watching Pruett's work in the interior with the expression of someone being compelled to observe something they find professionally offensive. He looked at the floor mats on the passenger seat. He looked at the scuff on the leather bolster. He looked at Calvin. Calvin held his gaze for a moment. He said nothing. The look communicated what it needed to communicate. "Stay cool," Tommy said, stepping slightly closer to Calvin under the pretense of maintaining visual. His voice was low, not conspiratorial, just quiet. "He's looking for a reason to escalate. Don't give him one." "How long have you been riding with him?" Calvin asked. He kept his voice at the same register, conversational, unhurried, the tone of a man having a normal exchange. 6 weeks. "How many stops like this in 6 weeks?" Tommy looked at his boots. He didn't answer. "You have a duty to intervene," Calvin said. Not an accusation, a professional statement, delivered the way he had delivered professional statements in 41 internal affairs interviews. Not a suggestion. It's codified in your department's use of force policy and in federal civil rights statutes. If you observe a constitutional violation in progress, your obligation is to intervene. "I know," Tommy said. "Then why haven't you?" A pause. Tommy looked at the car, at Pruett still working the interior, at the floor mats on the passenger seat. "I don't know," he said. And the honesty of this, the absence of justification or excuse, was, Calvin thought, possibly the most promising thing he had heard since arriving in Oak Grove. "What you're doing right now," Calvin said, "documenting this, keeping your camera active, that matters." Tommy looked at him. His hand went to his breast pocket. "Who are you?" Tommy asked. "Someone who's seen this before," Calvin said, from the other side of the desk. Finding nothing in the interior, Pruett moved to the front of the car. The Lamborghini Huracan is a mid-engine vehicle, the storage compartment. What Lamborghini calls the frunk sits under the front hood rather than the rear. Pruett found the interior hood release on the driver's side and pulled it. He walked to the front of the car and lifted the hood. Inside the frunk, resting in the center of the otherwise empty storage space, was the briefcase. Pruett's flashlight swept across it once and stopped. Metallic, high-end, dual combination locks, heavy gauge construction, the kind of case that carried important things. In Pruett's experience, the specific experience of a man whose perception of black men in expensive cars had been shaped by 11 years of confirmation bias. A locked briefcase in a supercar driven after dark meant one category of thing. He reached in and took hold of the case with both hands. He lifted it out. He turned and set it on the front hood of the Lamborghini, the midnight black clear coat catching the street lamp's light in a way that made the surface look almost liquid. The metal corner of the briefcase contacted the hood as he set it down. The contact produced a sound, small, precise, specific, and left a mark in the clear coat, a straight scratch, approximately 4 inches long, through the midnight black paint to the primer beneath. "Hey!" Calvin's voice cut across the quiet of the evening with a sharpness he had not used before, not loud, not aggressive, but with the particular snap of a man who has been patient for a specific amount of time and has reached its end. "Do not damage my vehicle." Pruett looked at him. He tapped the briefcase with the barrel of his flashlight. "Open it!" "No." The word was flat and final, the specific refusal of a man who has identified exactly where the line is and is standing on it. This stop was initiated without probable cause. The probable cause you cited, window tint, was factually impossible, given that both windows were fully lowered at the time of your approach. The secondary probable cause you cited, an odor of marijuana, is fabricated. This vehicle has been searched without my consent and without a warrant. What is in this case is private property. Opening it requires a warrant, which you do not have. I am explicitly refusing consent." Pruett stepped closer. "Give me the combination, or I'm arresting you for obstruction and impounding the vehicle." "Officer Ortega." Calvin looked past Pruett's shoulder to Tommy, who had moved to within 10 feet of the front of the car. "I want you to document that I am being threatened with false arrest as a mechanism to compel me to open private property without a warrant. I want you to document the scratch on the hood of this vehicle caused by how this case was placed on the surface, and I want you to document the precise time." Tommy looked at his watch. His hand did not leave his breast pocket. Pruett stepped into Calvin's space, close, deliberate, using his body as a statement. "The numbers." "Now." Calvin looked at him for a long moment. He looked at the scratch on the hood. He looked at the boulevard behind Pruett, at the empty sidewalk and the street lamps and the oak trees holding their last October leaves against the dark sky. He looked at the billboard at the south end of the avenue where a cruiser had been parked an hour ago with its lights off. He looked at Pruett. "The combination is 1887, he said, quietly. "Both locks." He did not explain where the number came from. He did not need to. Pruett reached for the left lock. He spun the brass dial. 1, 8, 8, 7. The latch released with a heavy, precise click, the sound of a mechanism designed to hold something valuable opening for the person authorized to open it. He repeated the sequence on the right lock. Another click. Simultaneous. He gripped the lid of the briefcase and lifted it. He did not speak. On the left side of the briefcase, thick folders, neatly arranged, bearing the official seal of the city of Oak Grove on their covers. The seal was gold embossed on dark blue stock, formal, governmental, the kind of document production that costs money and carries the weight of institutional authority. Pruett had seen city documents before. He knew what they looked like. He did not reach for the folders. On the right side, a folded item of clothing, dark blue, pressed with a precision that spoke of both professional habit and specific intention. As Pruett's flashlight moved across it, the light caught 4 points of reflected gold, one at each collar tip, where the insignia sat, 4 gold stars, the specific rank insignia of a chief of police in the state of Ohio. In the center of the briefcase, in a velvet inset that had been custom fitted to its exact dimensions, a badge, gold, heavy, the kind of badge that was not available at novelty shops or online prop retailers, the kind whose weight you could feel from a foot away, the kind that had been fabricated by the same manufacturer that produced every official badge issued by the city of Oak Grove for the past 60 years, etched into the gold surrounding the enamel city seal, in bold and precise lettering, Chief of Police, Oak Grove. Below the badge, clipped into a leather wallet attached to the right side of the interior, an official municipal identification card, a photograph, the specific face in the specific photograph of the man standing in front of Pruett on the sidewalk in a gray hoodie. The name beside the photograph, Calvin Reeves, Chief of Police, appointed by Mayor Frank Briggs. Pruett stood over the open briefcase. He did not speak. He did not move. His hand, which had been holding the lid, lowered slowly until it rested on the edge of the case. He looked at the badge. He looked at the identification card. He looked at the driver's license he was still holding in his left hand. The same name, the same face, and then back at the card, and then at the badge, and then at the card again. 6 seconds passed. During those 6 seconds, Tommy Ortega watched from 10 feet away with the expression of a man watching something he has been bracing for arrive exactly on schedule. He had known, not known who the man was, not known about the badge, but known in the way you know when a storm is moving in from the right direction, that this stop was going to cost something significant. He had not known until this moment how significant. During those 6 seconds, Calvin Reeves did not move. He stood at the side of his own car, hands at his sides, and watched Dale Pruett look at the badge. He did not speak. He did not allow himself any expression beyond the professional neutrality he had maintained since the lights came on, not because he did not feel anything, but because what he felt was not relevant to what needed to happen next. And he had spent 26 years learning to maintain this distinction. During those 6 seconds, on Meridian Avenue in Oak Grove on a Friday, October evening, the specific kind of impunity that had operated on these streets for 11 years reached its natural terminus. Then Pruett looked up. He tried 3 things. First, he looked at the driver's license and the identification card in alternating sequence, as if the third comparison would produce a different result from the second, which had produced a different result from the first. It did not. Second, he looked at Tommy, who looked back at him with the flat, unreadable expression of a man who has been waiting to give a deposition and is now certain that the deposition will happen. Third, he opened his mouth. "Chief, I didn't know. The windows, they appeared—" "Both windows," Calvin said, "were fully lowered before you left your vehicle." The sentence was not loud. It was not heated. It was the specific, final tone of a man closing an account, not with satisfaction, just with precision. The tint was not a factor. Both windows were down. You detected nothing. Calvin took 1 step toward the car, not toward Pruett, toward the car, to see the scratch on the hood in the street lamp's light. 4 inches, clean through the clear coat to the primer. He looked at it for a moment the way he would look at physical evidence at a scene. Then he looked at Pruett. "You fabricated a pretext to search a vehicle you had no lawful authority to stop. You did it because you made a determination about the driver based on his appearance and the car he was driving. You have done this before. You have done it 17 times, according to the complaint record, and each time someone in your department made it go away." He paused. "That mechanism is no longer available to you. Sir, do not call me sir." The sentence arrived with the specific, quiet force of a thing that had been held back for the duration of the stop and was now, precisely and without drama, released. 3 words. They did not require elaboration. Pruett heard them and went still in the specific way of a man who has understood. For the first time, the full dimensions of where he is standing. Calvin reached into the briefcase. He took the gold badge from its velvet inset. He held it in his left hand for a moment. The weight of it, the specific heft of a promise made to a dead man and to 41 complainants and to the young man who had sold his car because it was too nice to drive without being stopped. Then he looked at Pruett. "My appointment was ratified by the City Council on Thursday. Administrative authority effective upon the mayor's signature, which occurred at noon today. I am the Chief of Police of Oak Grove as of this moment, on this street, in these circumstances." He slid the badge into his jacket pocket. "Officer Ortega." He looked at Tommy. "Your body camera has been active since before this stop began. Is that correct?" Tommy: "Yes, sir." Officer Pruett's camera was not activated at the start of his shift. That is a violation of Policy 41-A. You will document the time of this stop, every statement made during it, and the condition of this vehicle before and after the search. You will preserve your camera footage and your personal audio recording in their complete, unedited form. Tommy looked at him. "Personal audio. Your breast pocket." Calvin's expression did not change. "Yes, both recordings, complete and unedited." Tommy looked at his breast pocket. He looked at Calvin. He nodded once. "Officer Pruett." Calvin took one step toward him, not close enough to intimidate, precisely close enough to be clear. "You are relieved of your duties effective immediately. You are suspended without pay pending investigation by the State Attorney General's Office and the FBI Civil Rights Division. You will surrender your badge and weapon to Officer Ortega." Pruett looked at him. The specific, practiced authority that had occupied his face for 11 years, the arrogance of a man accustomed to consequence-free action, was simply absent. What was left was not remorse and was not acceptance. It was the specific blankness of a man who has run out of moves and does not yet understand what that means for everything that comes next. He unpinned the badge from his chest. He placed it in Tommy's outstretched hand. He unholstered his weapon and placed it beside the badge. Calvin turned back to the car. He closed the briefcase, carefully, aligning the latches, spinning both combination locks. He walked to the front of the car and looked at the scratch on the hood one final time. 4 inches, clean through the midnight black clear coat, evidence. He closed the hood with a quiet, deliberate click. He got in the car. He started the engine, the V10 coming to life with the low, steady growl of a machine that had been waiting patiently. He looked in the rearview mirror. Tommy on the sidewalk, the badge and weapon in his hands, watching the taillights. Pruett standing beside his cruiser, hands at his sides, looking at nothing in particular. Calvin signaled. He pulled smoothly away from the curb. He set the cruise control to exactly 35 miles per hour and drove north on Meridian Avenue. He drove 6 blocks before pulling into the parking lot of a public library, closed for the evening, the lot empty, the entrance lights still burning over the glass doors. He parked. He turned off the engine. He sat in the dark and the quiet with his hands in his lap and let 60 seconds pass. He was not shaking. He had not been shaking at any point during the stop, but this was not the absence of feeling. It was the specific, practiced management of feeling that 26 years had produced, and he was aware that it had a cost, and that the cost was deferred rather than avoided, and that the library parking lot on a Friday evening was as good a place as any to let 30 seconds of it surface. He thought about the scratch on the hood. He thought about the floor mats on the passenger seat. He thought about Pruett's hand going to the holster before he had rounded the car. He thought about Tommy's hand pressing against his breast pocket and the specific quality of the young officer's face when Calvin said, "Your breast pocket, yes." Both recordings. He ran the case in order, from the first contact to the last. Fabricated window tint against windows that were visibly, verifiably down. Fabricated marijuana smell. Announced 40 seconds into the stop before physical proximity made any detection possible. Unauthorized search, damage to the vehicle, false arrest threat used to compel disclosure of private property, failure to activate body camera. Tommy's camera, active. Tommy's personal recording, active. The combination, 1887. He thought about that for a moment. The specific, small detail that would be described in every subsequent legal proceeding as the element that transformed a strong civil rights case into a case with no meaningful defense. Not because it changed the constitutional analysis. The stop was illegal with or without the briefcase. The search was illegal with or without what it contained, but because it proved, in a single number, that the man in the gray hoodie had known more about this department than the officer who stopped him, that the man in the gray hoodie had been preparing for this city for 6 weeks, while the officer who stopped him had been assuming that no one ever would. He reached to the passenger seat. He opened the worn leather folio. He found the letter, 3 pages, drafted over 3 weeks, addressed to the family of Detective James Whitfield. He found the place where he had written, "Tonight" counted in the margin of the 3rd page. He read it. Then he took a pen from the folio's inside pocket and wrote the final paragraph of the letter, the one he had not been able to write for 3 weeks. He wrote about what James had meant. He wrote about a spreadsheet that a man named Leon Okafor had been maintaining for 2 years. He wrote about a young man who had sold his car because it was too nice to drive without being stopped. He wrote, "I think this is what you meant. I'm going to keep trying to make it true." He sealed the envelope and put it back in the folio. He made 3 calls from the library parking lot. The first was to Mayor Frank Briggs. Briggs answered on the 2nd ring. Calvin said, "Mayor, one of your officers just illegally stopped and searched my vehicle on Meridian Avenue. I've relieved him of duty pending AG and FBI review. I need you in your office at 7 a.m. Monday." Briggs started to ask a question. Calvin said, "I'm fine. 7 a.m. He ended the call. The second was to Special Agent Patricia Voss at the FBI's Cleveland field office. He had worked with Voss twice before. Once on a use of force investigation that had produced 7 indictments, and once on a corruption case that had taken 2 years and produced 11. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone who screens unknown numbers. Calvin identified himself. The neutrality dissolved. "Calvin, what happened?" He gave her the stop in 3 minutes, precise and sequential. When he finished, Voss was quiet for 4 seconds. "Tommy Ortega's recordings. We need them preserved tonight. Chain of custody intact." Calvin, "I'll have Ortega deliver both to your field office by 10 p.m. He'll cooperate fully." Voss, "I'll be in Oak Grove Monday morning." The 3rd call was to Tommy directly. He had noted the badge number during the stop, which gave him the departmental contact. It rang twice. "Officer Ortega, you need to deliver your body camera footage and your personal voice recording to the FBI Cleveland field office tonight. Unedited, full recordings, chain of custody preserved. Can you do that?" A pause, then Tommy. "Yes, sir." His voice had changed. Not the guarded, hesitant tone of the past 6 weeks. Something steadier, with the specific quality of a man who has made a decision he can stand behind. "What you did tonight," Calvin said, "turning your camera on when he didn't, keeping the recording, that was right." He ended the call. He started the engine. He drove back to his hotel through the dark streets of Oak Grove with the letter in the folio on the passenger seat and the gold badge in his jacket pocket. And he thought about what Monday was going to look like, and about the 41 names in the footnotes of a DOJ report, and about the 11 minutes it had taken, 6 weeks ago in a rental car, before anyone found him. 4 minutes tonight. He was making progress. At 7:15 a.m. on Monday, Calvin stood in the bathroom of his hotel room and looked at himself in the mirror. He was wearing the dark blue uniform shirt from the briefcase. It fit exactly as it should. He had been measured for it 3 weeks ago in Cleveland, and the tailor had done his job with the precision that the occasion required. The 4 gold stars on each collar caught the bathroom light. He looked at them for a moment, not with vanity, not with satisfaction, but with the specific gravity of a man putting on something that carries the weight of a promise. He attached the gold badge to his chest. He straightened it twice. He thought about James Whitfield, about the break room on a Tuesday in November, about the word when rather than if. He thought about the 41 names. He thought about the scratch on the hood of the Lamborghini, which was at a body shop on Route 9 as of this morning. He had called them at 8 p.m. Friday and told them to photograph every detail of the damage before touching it. Evidence, he had said. "Don't touch it until I release it." He picked up his phone. He sent Patricia Voss a message. "Ready when you are." He went downstairs. He drove to City Hall. The swearing-in was at 9 a.m. in the main chamber. The room held the mayor, the city council, 6 department heads, a room full of reporters, and 3 camera crews from regional news networks. Calvin stood at the podium after the oath and spoke without notes. He did not talk about his career or his vision or the honor of the appointment. He spoke for 4 minutes about the DOJ report. He read 3 specific statistics from it. From memory, the stop disparity rate on Meridian Avenue, the search rate following those stops, the discovery rate on those searches. He read them the way he read them in his own head, as a record of something real that had happened to real people in this city. Then he said, "These numbers represent people. I know that because on Friday evening, I was one of them." He described the stop, factually, in sequence, in the same tone he had used in 41 internal affairs debriefs. The fabricated window tint against fully lowered windows, the fabricated marijuana odor, the illegal search, the scratch on the hood. He said, "The officer who stopped me did not know who I was. He did not need to. What he did was wrong, regardless of who was in that car. This department is going to start acting like that is true." He did not name Pruett. He did not need to. At 11:15 a.m., Calvin walked into Captain Roy Haller's office and closed the door. He set a folder on the desk. It contained 17 use-of-force complaint files, each bearing Haller's review signature, each marked reviewed and dismissed. Average dismissal time, 8.5 days. He had tabulated this himself over the weekend, the specific, auditable record of 19 years of a complaint process that existed on paper and was managed in practice as a mechanism of protection rather than accountability. Haller looked at the folder. He was 62 years old, heavy-set, the kind of man who had occupied positions of authority long enough that authority had become indistinguishable from his personality. He looked at Calvin with the expression of a man who is calculating his options and arriving, one by one, at the conclusion that he does not have as many as he thought. He started to speak. Calvin held up one hand. "I'm not here to discuss it. The Attorney General's office received this file at 9 this morning. You are on administrative leave effective now. Badge and weapon. Please." Haller looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the folder. Then he removed his badge from his chest and his weapon from his holster and placed both on top of the 17 complaint files. 19 years, he said. 2 words carrying the specific weight of a man who had expected those 19 years to constitute protection. Calvin looked at the badge on the folder. 19 years of this, he said, touching the folder. Yes. That afternoon, Calvin called Tommy Ortega into his office. Tommy entered with the careful posture of someone awaiting a verdict, the particular uncertainty of a person who has cooperated against a colleague and does not yet know what that cooperation has cost him. He sat across from Calvin in the chair on the other side of the desk and waited. Calvin set something on the desk between them. A business card, plain, the department seal in the upper left corner, the words Internal Affairs Division, investigator track beneath it. You turned your camera on before you got out of the car, Calvin said. Before you knew who I was. Before you knew anything except that what was happening was wrong. You made a record when no one was asking you to. I wasn't sure it was the right call, Tommy said. It was, Calvin said. It was the case. Everything after it was confirmation. Tommy looked at the card on the desk. He was 23 years old and had been in law enforcement for 7 months and had, in those 7 months, developed a specific understanding of the gap between what the job was supposed to be and what he had been watching it be, and had not known what to do with that understanding, and was now sitting across from the chief of police being told that what he had done about it was right. Don't ever stop making that call, Calvin said. Tommy picked up the card. He nodded. It was enough. Patricia Voss arrived at the Oak Grove PD Monday morning with 2 agents from the Cleveland field office and the specific, unhurried authority of a woman who had been building civil rights cases against law enforcement defendants for 17 years and had learned, in those 17 years, exactly how to move through a police department without triggering the institutional defensive responses that complicated investigations. She was 51, gray-haired, with reading glasses that she wore on a chain around her neck, and reached for at specific intervals with the precision of someone who has learned that clarity of vision is not optional. She had worked with Calvin twice before. She trusted his preparation and he trusted her thoroughness, and this mutual trust was the foundation on which the next 8 months would be built. She reviewed Tommy's body camera footage Monday morning in a closed conference room. Calvin present, 2 agents taking notes. The footage ran 43 minutes. Nobody spoke during it. When it ended, Voss closed her laptop. Fabricated tint against visibly lowered windows, she said. Fabricated odor, damage to the vehicle, no camera activation by the primary officer. The personal recording corroborates the camera at every point. She looked at Calvin. This is one stop. What's the pattern? The pattern was in Haller's files. 17 complaints, 9 years. A single reviewer, an average dismissal time that spoke to process management rather than genuine review. Voss's team spent 3 days cross-referencing the complaints with the department's own traffic stop logs, locations, driver demographics, search rates, discovery rates. What they found extended the DOJ report and then went beyond it. Pruett's stops in the Meridian Corridor over 11 years showed a 340% higher minority driver rate than the department average. Of 68 stops in that corridor over the previous 2 years, 44 had involved minority drivers. 39 had proceeded to search. 0 had produced drug charges. 0. The searches were documented. The complaints were documented. The dismissals were documented. The entire record was sitting in the department's own filing system, accessible to anyone with the authority and the will to look. Nobody with authority had looked, or rather, nobody with authority had looked and been in a position to act, and nobody in a position to act had had the will to look. The two requirements had never been satisfied simultaneously. Until now. Gary Sweeney, the police union's representative, arrived Tuesday morning to discuss Pruett's administrative review. He was 55, 16 years in the role, with the professional confidence of a man who had successfully defended 14 officers in misconduct proceedings. He sat across from Voss in the conference room with his arguments organized and his tone set for a prolonged negotiation. Voss said, "Before we discuss anything, I'd like you to watch something." She opened her laptop. She played 30 minutes of Tommy's footage, the approach, the fabricated tint, the fabricated odor, the search, the scratch, the briefcase. She played it without comment. Sweeney watched. He was a professional, and what he was watching was professionally indefensible, and he had enough professional integrity to recognize the distinction between a case that was politically difficult and a case that had no floor. His arguments, as he had organized them, began to lose their structure during the first 5 minutes of footage and had completely dissolved by the 15th. When the footage ended, he sat for a moment. Then he picked up his phone. He made a call. He said 4 words, "Pull our support, now." He closed the phone. He looked at Voss. "You'll have our formal statement by end of business." Gerald Thorne took the defense case on Thursday, referred by a contact in the union's legal network before the union's withdrawal was formally communicated. He was 60 years old, expensive, and had built a career on exactly this category of case. He had won 22 of 26 civil rights defense cases involving law enforcement defendants. He took Pruett's case because the referral fee was guaranteed and because, on the surface, a traffic stop that had gone badly was something he had navigated before. He read the case file Thursday evening. He watched Tommy's footage for the first time at 9 p.m. in his office, alone. With a glass of water, he poured at the beginning and did not drink. He watched the windows, fully down, visibly so, as Pruett announced window tint as his probable cause. He watched the fabricated marijuana announcement. He watched the briefcase come out of the frunk and land on the hood and the scratch the metal corner left in the clear coat. He watched Calvin's face. He had defended 22 cases and he had lost 4, and he knew. From the 4. What a case without a defense looked like. He had seen complainants on witness stands who were angry or frightened or whose credibility was complicated by their circumstances. He had never seen a complainant whose face, for the full duration of a 43-minute recording, displayed the specific, clinical calm of a man who was not reacting to what was happening, but documenting it. A man who was building the case against his own attacker in real time, with the precision of someone who had spent 8 years doing exactly this. He watched Calvin give the combination, 1887, said in the same tone you would give someone the time of day. He watched the briefcase open. He watched Pruett's face. He sat in his office for a long time. Then he drafted a 2-sentence email to Pruett, declining representation. He sent it at 11:47 p.m. He did not explain his reasoning. He did not need to. Pruett's case went to a public defender, Rosa Vargas, 29 years old, carrying 22 active cases, who met with Pruett once before the trial and told him, with the direct honesty of someone who respects her clients enough not to mislead them, "The footage is the case. Everything else is analysis." Leon Okafor was 39 years old and worked as a software engineer at a logistics company in Oak Grove, a position he had held for 6 years because it was stable and because the health insurance covered his mother's dialysis treatments and because, after the 3rd illegal stop in 8 months, stability had become the primary criterion by which he evaluated employment. 2 years ago, Pruett had stopped him 3 times on Meridian Avenue, all 3 times fabricated marijuana smell, all 3 times search, all 3 times nothing found, all 3 times complaint filed, all 3 complaints reviewed and dismissed by Holler within 9 days. After the third dismissal, Leon had done something he had not done before. He opened a spreadsheet. He documented each stop, date, time, precise location, every word spoken, duration of the search, what was found, the complaint number, the dismissal date, the language of the dismissal notice. He attached photographs he had taken of his car's interior after the second search, which had left the center console contents on the passenger seat and the floor mats overturned, photographs he had taken immediately after the officer left, while the displacement was still fresh, with the specific intention of having a record in case the record ever mattered. He saved the spreadsheet on his personal cloud drive. He printed a physical copy and placed it in a file folder in the cabinet beside his desk at home. He did not know who would ever ask for it. He kept it because it was true, and because keeping true things was the only form of power available to him, and because he had decided that he was not going to let this be something that happened and then was only his memory. He also changed his commute. He recalculated his route to avoid Meridian Avenue. The alternate route added 11 minutes each way. He had been adding 22 minutes to his daily commute for 19 months. When Calvin's press conference aired on Monday afternoon, the footage, the statistics, the factual account of Friday's stop, Leon watched it on his phone from his desk at work. He watched it twice. He paused it at the moment Calvin said, "I do not consent to any search of this property," and studied the calm on the man's face. He watched the scratch on the hood. He watched the briefcase open. He opened his spreadsheet. He looked at the 3 dates, the 3 case numbers, the 3 dismissal notices. He thought about the folder in his filing cabinet at home. He thought about 19 months of 22 extra minutes per day. He picked up his phone and called the FBI field office in Oak Grove, whose number had been printed at the bottom of Calvin's press release. Voss's team, working from the complaint files and Pruett's stop logs, identified 8 additional individuals who had filed complaints in the past 4 years, all dismissed. 5 were reachable and willing to participate. Leon was the most thoroughly documented. 2 others had partial records and clear, consistent accounts. Rosa Delgado, a nurse who had been stopped in a hospital parking garage while walking to her car after a night shift, told she matched the description of a theft suspect from a different zip code. And Harold Webb, a contractor who had been stopped while loading furniture into a van outside his new apartment and told the van was suspicious. All 5 described the same structure: fabricated probable cause, search, nothing found, complaint, dismissal. All 5 had changed their behavior in response. Leon had rerouted his commute. Rosa parked in a different structure. Harold had sold the van and used a rental when he needed to transport materials. "I just wanted to drive my van," Harold wrote in a statement, in a line so simple and so complete that it required nothing added to it. Voss shared the victim profiles with Calvin on Thursday morning. He read them in order, without comment. When he finished, he set the file on the conference table and looked at the window for a moment. He thought about the DOJ report's footnotes. He thought about the rental car. 6 weeks ago, and the 11 minutes before someone found him. He thought about Leon Okafor's spreadsheet and the 22 minutes added to a daily commute for 19 months and the specific grinding cost of that arithmetic. "I want Leon Okafor's testimony to precede mine at every proceeding," he said. "Why?" Voss asked. "Because I had a gold badge and a prepared briefcase and your number in my phone. Leon had a spreadsheet and a longer commute. Pruett did the same thing to both of us. The difference was what we had available to respond with." He looked at Voss. "The court needs to understand both sides of that equation." "Leon first," Voss said. "Leon first," Calvin confirmed, and Harold's statement read into the record verbatim. That line about the van. A USA Diana Ruiz handled the federal prosecution, deprivation of rights under color of law. 18 U.S.C. Section 242 and assault. Against Haller, obstruction of justice and conspiracy to deprive persons of civil rights. built on the documented complaint suppression record. Both defendants were tried separately. This is the account of Pruett's trial. The qualified immunity question was resolved in the first pretrial motion. Judge Harold Fitch reviewed the Fourth Amendment's protection of a vehicle from warrantless search against the documented facts of the stop and issued a 3-page ruling that was notable primarily for its brevity. The constitutional principle was clearly established. The fabricated probable cause removed any good faith exception, and the question of immunity was closed. Reeves did not celebrate this ruling. She had expected it. She spent the time she might have spent celebrating preparing the witnesses. Reeves opened the trial without a speech. She stood in front of the jury and said, "I'm going to show you something." She played Tommy's body camera footage. 43 minutes, in a full courtroom, in complete silence. When it ended, she let the silence continue for 8 seconds. Then, the man in the gray hoodie had been a homeowner in this city for 2 days. He had been the appointed chief of police of this city for approximately 6 hours. She sat down. Leon Okafor took the stand on the second day of the trial. He was dressed in the dark slacks and button-down he wore to important work meetings. He brought the spreadsheet, printed, bound, every entry time-stamped, the photographs of the displaced center console attached as an exhibit. He testified for 51 minutes. He described the 3 stops in sequence with the specific, unhurried precision of a man who had been maintaining this record for 2 years and knew it cold. The dates, the locations, the words used, the duration, the nothing found. He described filing the complaint each time. He described the 9-day dismissal each time. He described opening the spreadsheet after the 3rd dismissal. Reeves asked, "Why did you keep the spreadsheet for 2 years?" "Mr. Okafor, when each complaint had been dismissed and the complaint process had not produced any result." Leon was quiet for a moment. He looked at the spreadsheet in front of him. Then he looked at the jury. "Because it happened. It happened to me. On streets in this city. And I was going to make sure there was a record of it somewhere that nobody could dismiss. I didn't know if it would ever matter. I kept it because it was true." He paused. "I didn't know when I started the spreadsheet that the person who would eventually need it would be the chief of police." The courtroom was quiet. Tommy Ortega took the stand on the 3rd day. He played both recordings, the body camera footage and the voice memo from his personal phone, in sequence. He testified about every decision he made on Friday evening, why he activated his own camera when Pruett did not, why he pressed record on his personal phone, the conversation at the rear of the car, what Calvin said to him after the stop. When Reeves asked why he had made the personal recording, Tommy said, "Because I knew what I was watching was wrong. I had known it was wrong 11 other times in 6 weeks, and I hadn't done anything about it. This time I thought, if I can't stop it, I can at least make sure there's something that tells the truth about what happened, so that whoever came next would have it." He looked at the jury. "I didn't know who he was. I just knew what was happening was wrong." He received full cooperation immunity. He kept his badge. Calvin took the stand on the 4th day. He wore his uniform, dark blue, 4 gold stars, the gold badge on his chest. He sat in the witness box with the posture he had held at every professional engagement of his adult life, straight, still, present. He did not look at Pruett at the defense table. He looked at Reeves, and when she finished, he looked at the jury. Reeves took him through the stop. His answers were precise and without embellishment. When she reached the window tint, "Chief Reeves, at the time Officer Pruett cited window tint as his reason for the stop. What was the state of your windows?" "Both windows were fully lowered. They had been fully lowered since before I stopped the car. This was visible to anyone approaching the vehicle from any angle." "And the marijuana odor?" "I don't smoke. No one has smoked in that vehicle." Officer Pruett announced the odor approximately 40 seconds after approaching the car, before he had come within a distance that would have made any olfactory detection through open windows plausible. The statement was fabricated. When she reached the briefcase, "Chief Reeves, why did you give Officer Pruett the combination?" "Because he was threatening false arrest and impoundment if I didn't. The combination was mine to give, and giving it was the most efficient way to end the encounter on terms that preserved every element of the evidentiary record." "Why 1887? Calvin looked at the jury. "It's the year Oak Grove was incorporated. I had spent 6 weeks preparing to lead this department, and in that preparation, I read everything available about its history and its current condition. I set that combination the day the briefcase was delivered because I wanted something only the chief of this department would know. Not because I anticipated someone demanding it, but because I like things to be right." A pause. "When someone demands the combination to your property under threat of false arrest, you find out whether the combination you chose was worth choosing." Ruiz asked her final question. "Chief Reeves, in your 26 years in law enforcement, including 8 years as head of an internal affairs division, what is your professional assessment of what occurred on Meridian Avenue on Friday evening?" Calvin looked at the jury directly. "My assessment is that Officer Pruett committed a textbook civil rights violation, fabricated probable cause, illegal search, destruction of private property, coercive threats against a man he had decided, based on race and vehicle, did not belong on a public road. He did this within an institution that had processed 17 similar complaints in 9 years and dismissed every one. He was not an accident. He was a product of a complaint review structure that had been managed for 19 years as a protection mechanism rather than an accountability mechanism." He paused. "The briefcase is the part everyone talks about. I understand that. But the case, the legal case, the civil rights case, exists without the briefcase. Leon Okafor's spreadsheet is the same case. Rosa Delgado's complaint is the same case. Harold Webb's statement about wanting to drive his van is the same case. All of those cases deserved the outcome this trial represents. They didn't get it. Not because the evidence wasn't there. The evidence was in Haller's files for 9 years. But because the mechanism that was supposed to examine the evidence was being managed by the person with the most to lose from an honest examination." He looked at Haller, who was not in this courtroom, but whose presence was in every file that had been entered into evidence. "This trial is about what happened to me on Friday. It's also about what happened to 41 people before me. It is most importantly about what we are going to do differently starting now, so that the 42nd person doesn't need a gold badge in their briefcase for the outcome to be what it should always have been." He looked at the jury. "That's all," he said. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 14 minutes. The foreperson was a retired school principal named Carolyn Briggs, no relation to the mayor, a fact the defense had noted during jury selection and had ultimately been unable to use as cause for dismissal. She was 63 years old and had spent 30 years in a profession built on the specific daily effort of helping young people understand the difference between what the rules say and what they mean. She read the verdict in a voice that carried to every corner of the courtroom without requiring extra effort. Guilty on all counts. Pruett sat at the defense table and looked at the surface of the table. His hands, beneath the table, pressed flat against his thighs. Rosa Vargas sat beside him and looked at her notepad, which was clean. In the back row of the gallery, Calvin Reeves sat with his hands folded in his lap and watched the foreperson's face as she read, and thought about nothing except what was being said. Judge Harold Fitch sentenced Pruett 1 week after the verdict. The courtroom was full. Leon Okafor was in the gallery. Tommy Ortega was in the gallery, in civilian clothes, looking younger than he had at any point during the trial. Harold Webb was in the gallery, Sitting 2 rows behind Leon, Rosa Delgado was in the gallery. Judge Fitch said, "Mr. Pruett, the court has read the complaint record. 17 filings over 9 years, each one representing a person who used the mechanism they were given to report what happened to them, and each one managed out of the system in 9 days by a supervisor who reviewed it personally and found it inconvenient. You operated within that structure and you benefited from it, and you used that benefit to continue doing what this trial has established you were doing." The court has heard from Leon Okafor, who kept a spreadsheet for 2 years because it was the only record he could make that nobody could take away from him. The court has heard from Rosa Delgado, who changed her parking structure. The court has heard from Harold Webb, who wrote, in 4 words, that he just wanted to drive his van. Those are the people the law was designed to protect. You were hired to be part of that protection. You were, instead, the reason they needed it. 12 years, federal custody, full forfeiture of pension and law enforcement benefits, permanent bar from law enforcement employment at any level. The gavel. Haller pleaded guilty to obstruction and conspiracy 6 weeks after Pruett's verdict, on the advice of his attorney, who had reviewed the complaint dismissal record and the documented template language and concluded, with professional directness, that a trial would produce a longer sentence with greater public exposure. He received 6 years, federal custody, and the loss of all retirement benefits accumulated across 19 years. His plea included a full written account of the complaint review process, the template language, the 9-day target, the specific calculation that complaints settled quickly were complaints that did not accumulate into patterns requiring external review. This account was entered into the public record. Gary Sweeney submitted a formal written statement supporting the department's reform audit. He did not editorialize. He did not express regret. He submitted a professional statement in clear language and returned to his office and did his job. Leon Okafor received a civil settlement from the city, substantial, his attorney said, though Leon found the word insufficient for what the amount was supposed to represent. He received a formal written apology signed by Calvin Reeves on department letterhead. He read the apology once. He did not frame it. He deposited the settlement and used the first interest payment to buy new floor mats for his car, the same model as the ones Pruett had overturned during the second search, the ones he had photographed for the spreadsheet. He started driving on Meridian Avenue again. The first morning, pulling onto the avenue at the south end, he noticed the familiar stretch of road, the oak trees, the street lamps, the billboard at mile marker 3, where he now knew a cruiser had parked on Friday evenings with its lights off. He drove the length of the avenue at the posted limit and arrived at his office 11 minutes earlier than he had for the previous 19 months. He kept the spreadsheet. He kept it in the same cloud folder and the same filing cabinet, updated now with the trial dates and the verdict and the settlement. He did not expect to need it again. He kept it because some things are worth keeping even after they have served their purpose. Harold Webb's letter, 4 sentences, ending with "I just want to drive my van," was pinned to the wall above Calvin's desk at the Oak Grove PD on the day he moved in. It was still there. Tommy Ortega transferred to the Internal Affairs Division 6 months after the trial. On his first day in the new unit, he found a handwritten note on his desk from Calvin. 1 sentence, "The camera was the case, don't forget." He put the note in his wallet. He kept it there. 3 weeks after sentencing, Calvin drove to the logistics building on Oak Grove's east side where Leon Okafor worked, a mid-rise of glass and steel. Anonymous in the specific way of mid-sized corporate buildings in mid-sized American cities. He parked in the visitor lot. He went inside and asked for Leon at the front desk. Leon came down in the elevator wearing dark slacks and a company polo, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, clearly not expecting a visitor. He saw Calvin and stopped. "I wanted to thank you," Calvin said, "for the spreadsheet, For keeping it for 2 years when you had every reason to stop. Leon looked at him. You had a gold badge and a briefcase. I had resources you didn't have. Pruett did the same thing to both of us. Calvin paused. Your spreadsheet is the reason 41 people are in the record. Without it, this was one stop. With it, it was a pattern. That's the difference between a case and a reckoning. Leon was quiet for a moment. They stood in the lobby, a man who had kept a record for 2 years and a man who had been building toward this city for 6 weeks, arrived at the same place from entirely different angles. Does it change things? Leon asked. For real, not just for the courtroom. That depends on what comes next, Calvin said. What I can tell you is that the complaint review process has been restructured. External review, mandatory, no single supervisor with sole discretion. The data tracking is live and public. That doesn't undo what happened to you, but it means the next person who files a complaint doesn't need a gold badge in their briefcase for it to go somewhere. Leon nodded. It was not a complete answer, and both of them knew it, and both of them stood with that for a moment. I'll keep the spreadsheet, Leon said. Keep it, Calvin said. But drive on Meridian. A pause. Then, something that was not quite a smile on Leon's face. Something quieter, less certain, closer to the specific expression of a person deciding to try again. I already am, Leon said. That evening, Calvin sat at the desk in his office with Harold Webb's letter on the wall and the worn leather folio open in front of him. He took out the letter to James Whitfield's family, sealed now, stamped, addressed, ready. He had written the final paragraph 3 weeks ago in the library parking lot. In the same night he had driven to the hotel and sat in the quiet with the gold badge in his jacket pocket. He held the envelope in his hands for a moment. He thought about James saying when rather than if. He thought about Leon's spreadsheet and the 22 extra minutes per day for 19 months. He thought about Harold Webb's 4 words. He thought about Tommy's hand pressing against his breast pocket on a dark street in October and the decision that hand was making. He put the envelope in his jacket pocket. He would mail it in the morning. Late that evening, he got in the Lamborghini. The repair was flawless. The body shop technician had done precise work, and the midnight black clear coat showed no evidence of where the scratch had been. Calvin had released it from evidence status 3 weeks ago, after the sentencing, and the shop had called him the following day to say it was ready. He had picked it up that afternoon and run his hand over the repaired section in the parking lot and felt the seamless surface and thought, evidence, then history, then paint. He drove to Meridian Avenue. He entered at the south end, passed the billboard at mile marker 3, and set the cruise control to exactly 35 miles per hour, both hands at 10 and 2. The street lamps made their circles of light on the sidewalk. The oak trees were bare now. It was November, and the last of October's leaves had come down in the previous week's rain. The avenue was quiet. He drove the full length of Meridian from south to north. He passed the street lamp where the stop had happened. He knew which one by the position of the curb relative to the nearest driveway, a detail he had registered without deciding to register it on Friday evening and had never forgotten. He passed it without slowing. He drove to the north end of the avenue and turned around and drove it again. Because he could. And because there was something in the act of driving this road without event that was its own form of documentation. He checked the rearview mirror. The road behind him was empty. No cruiser behind the billboard. No lights in the mirror. Just the avenue and the street lamps and the dark sky above the bare oak trees. He drove. Dale Pruett entered federal custody at FCY Elkton, Ohio, 28 days after sentencing. He is housed in the Protective Custody Unit, standard classification for former law enforcement. His first parole review is at year 4. He has filed 1 appeal, It was denied. His attorney on the appeal was not Gerald Thorne, who declined, and not Rosa Vargas, who had moved to other cases. The appeal was handled by a public defender whose name Pruett struggles to remember. Meridian Avenue is still there. The oak trees still line both sides, bare in winter and full in summer, indifferent to everything that has happened under them. The billboard at mile marker 3 is empty, has been empty since October. The advertising space lapsed when the previous tenant's contract ran out and no new tenant has signed. Drivers pass it on their way to wherever they are going. Some of them were there on that Friday evening and remember. Most of them were not and don't. The road is the same road. The difference is invisible from the surface, which is how the most important changes tend to work. Calvin Reeves never wanted to be a symbol or a story. He took a job in a city that needed cleaning up, because a man he loved told him once to make sure the people who need protecting actually get protected, and because he had spent 26 years watching what happens when that doesn't happen. He wasn't the first person stopped on Meridian Avenue. He was the first person stopped on Meridian Avenue who could do something about all the people stopped before him. That is not justice. Exactly. Justice would mean Leon Okafor never needed a spreadsheet. Justice would mean Harold Webb never had to write that he just wanted to drive his van. But it is what was available on a Friday evening in October, with a gold badge in a briefcase and a combination only a chief would know. And it is. Calvin has decided, enough to keep going.